All right, welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is Katie Hill. She's a contributor for Outdoor Life. She's written for Meateater and a pretty much prolific writer in the outdoor space. Welcome to the podcast, Katie.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So can you talk about the getting into the industry? Because that's always kind of a funny thing. I know when I first started writing about hunting, because I grew up in Southeast Alaska, but I didn't start hunting until I was in my 30s. So I felt like there was this, I wasn't qualified to start writing about hunting until I had like 5 or 10 years of experience. So did you experience anything like that? How did you get writing into this space or qualify for such big publications?
Oh man. So I had no idea that I was going to end up in the hunting media space. I had wanted to be a sports journalist from the time that I was in, I guess, like eighth grade. I did a school project on the I turned into like a reporter on like the local Little League teams in my hometown in Connecticut. And I grew up playing softball. I was a 4-season softball player for 5 years. And so I was like very much a sports kid and wanted to write about sports, wanted to write about, well, really, I wanted to write about baseball. I saw the writing on the wall and knew that softball wasn't like the most exciting sport for viewers at the time. So I went to Emerson College in downtown Boston to play softball and to study journalism with hopes of becoming a beat writer for the Red Sox. And I didn't have the best experience. I don't want to like badmouth Emerson College. It's a great school and a great athletic program, but I did not have like a great personality match with the coaching staff. I just like didn't have a great time. So after my sophomore year, I quit. And I had this really random moment, like my summer of, I guess the summer before my sophomore year, where I woke up and decided that I just very randomly like wanted to go for a trail run. I grew up in like a rural, kind of like a rural suburban town in northwestern Connecticut. And so I just kind of like went out to this trail system near my house and went for a run. And running was not a thing that I really loved to do growing up. So this is kind of strange. But I kind of like fell in love with that version of trail running very randomly. And then I quit softball and I actually went and I hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu by myself when I was in college, and I was working on a ranch in Wyoming every summer. And so I kind of like had this outdoorsy sort of awakening, I guess. And so I went back to school my junior year of college. I guess it was my junior year. I picked up an environmental studies minor and kind of started looking into environmental journalism. And I like discovered Outside magazine for the first time and realized that people made a living off of writing about outdoor recreation, outdoor adventure, travel and tourism, those kinds of things. So between that and my time in Wyoming, I also knew I kind of wanted to end up in the West. And so I ended up at the Environmental Science and Natural Resources Journalism program at the University of Montana. And so that was a 2-year program. We got smacked with COVID like halfway through my second semester. So most of it was online, which was kind of a bummer. But Missoula is not a bad place to be locked down. So I had a great time, really like expanding my comfort zone in the outdoors, just hiking and trail running. And I like tried to pick up fly fishing pretty poorly. And I kind of like had some scattered plans to start hunting. My dad hunted when I was growing up, but it was never really something that was super available to me. Like I just wasn't interested. I was like a very stereotypical 14-year-old girl in Connecticut who just like wanted to play sports and, I wasn't super interested in the outdoors. So, But when I moved to Missoula, it kind of became clear that was something I would want to do. So after graduating from the master's program in 2021, about a month later, I got a call from my program advisor, Nadia White, and she kind of told me that an alumna of the program named Sam Lundgren, who is a pretty prominent
Yeah, I've heard of him.
outdoor writer. Yeah, and he's like a Pacific Northwest guy and an Alaska guy. I would be getting a call from Sam because Sam was looking for a copy editor at Meateater. He was in charge of the web editorial content for them at that point. And so I really had this opportunity to enter the hunting media kind of like dropped in my lap. And I worked very hard during grad school, and I was, I wrote a little bit about like ranching and some wildlife stuff. I did my master's thesis on the whooping crane migration through the Midwest. So I was always kind of like interested in wildlife, but I did not show like an obsession with hunting media by any stretch of the imagination. But I also had like tags for my first hunt that fall. And so I started at Meateater as like the most true definition of a beginner hunter at the same time. So I really dove in head first to all of it.
That's a good way to do it. Like, there's like the sports world, and then there's the outdoors world. And growing up when your identity is so much in sports, as it is for a lot of kids, there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But then at some point, there's an end to that. And most kids realize the end to that is at the end of high school. So the percentage of kids who play college sports is very, very low. A, because it's difficult, but also B, people recognize that that's the end. And then sometimes it's in college, and then what do you do with that? It's over. What am I going to fill that gap with, this time with, the recreation with? And so when people find that outdoor world, like you said, there's so much to do. And it sounded like you went to Machu Picchu like almost immediately after you discovered the outdoor world. And there's a lot out there, and it is awesome. It can be difficult to, I know, kind of find your space in there, but there's so much there. It's fun and inviting, and the people are really, really helpful and willing to help you on your journey.
And it's like, I was never, I like tried to do like the gym brat thing, and it was just never going to work. Like I needed sunshine. And I think it was also kind of at this time when, and this was pre-COVID, because I feel like outdoor recreation got very trendy during COVID. Mm-hmm. But like pre-COVID, that build was already kind of happening, where people were getting really into hiking kind of randomly. Or maybe I was just becoming aware of it. Like, I don't really know whether it was just me or if there was like some larger interest in it around me. But yeah, it was I always say that like the athlete to hiker trash pipeline is very real. Mm-hmm. Because you go from that like that setting where you're exercising and you're exerting yourself for a pretty distinct purpose, and there's an end result, there's an end goal, and that translates much better into trying to bag a peak or notch a tag, or I don't know, whatever your like outdoor pursuit end goal of choice is. Like, that's a much more effective use of that energy than just trying to I don't know, boost your 1 rep max in a gym. And that's no hatred to anybody who chooses that outlet, but it made more sense in my brain.
The variety that you get from the outdoors is huge, and everything is about social media. So maybe to the point where it's not everything is about social media, but maybe everything is about social media. And if you are online and your algorithm is feeding you these other experiences or opportunities when it comes to hiking or fishing or outdoorsing or hunting, you kind of get swept up in it and reminded like the type of person that you want to be. Like who you are on social media isn't exactly who you are, but it is a representation of maybe the highlights. It can be like an outdoor resume. And I think pre-COVID, when social media, the proliferation in 2013, 2014, I think it motivated a lot of people to have different experiences rather than go to their same boring trail. It became a way to kind of share those experiences, meet other people, and be motivated to maybe take some trips outside of their normal area and look at other peaks or other challenges or other opportunities.
Yeah, the algorithm knew that I was having a crisis of identity. It definitely did. That didn't even occur to me until you just said that, but that's so true. And of course that's so front of mind for me now, being like an angsty writer who gets frustrated about AI and winning the algorithm and whatnot. But that's absolutely what was happening back then too. It must be. That's the only explanation.
Yeah. It can be hard to kind of manage that because as a writer, you have to do some level of promotion. As a freelance writer, there has to be clips. There has to be a way to, draw attention to what you're doing. So you have to use it, but in a positive way. Have you been able to use social media for good and not get sucked into the downside of that whole, if I don't bag this peak or if I really hype up this hunting trip but don't get anything, I have to do it's just great to be out there post, which you may or may not mean, but it's the right thing to say?
I have never thought of myself as a social media person. Maybe at one time I would have been really excited to become what we now dub like an influencer. I think I'm always first of all worried about like the imposter syndrome of being like a new hunter and being a new outdoor writer is pretty strong. And I think for that reason, I don't like really put myself out there very much. I do think that I don't know, you can't really exist like in the Meateater universe or the, any of like the major hunting media universe without like amassing some following. But I mean, I definitely remember having this kind of internal reckoning with the fact that, a story kind of went viral and now I'm getting all these follow requests from people that I don't know. And there was a large amount of kind of discomfort that came with that at first, I would say. Mainly just because I'm like, not to play like the aw shucks card, but like the town I grew up in was small. I graduated with like 120 kids, which by Connecticut standards is tiny. So like I knew everybody that I grew up with, and then went to like a small college too. So like it never occurred to me that I would be that visible at that level. And I mean, I don't know, like 2,000 something Instagram followers. Like I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I don't use social media, but I also have, 60,000 followers. Like I have what I have, and I post what I want to post when I want to post it. And if people like it, great. If they don't, they can leave. I don't know. That's kind of my theory. Like I try to I don't think I'm ever going to convince anybody to enjoy my writing by posting about it on social media. Like I think if they want it, they're going to find it. And like I'm not going to convince anybody to either like or dislike what I do based on my social media profile. At least I hope that's the case. Maybe that's really, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the outdoor realm, I don't know anything. Like my idea of the outdoor realm is from my view here in Ketchikan, Alaska, so I don't really have a pulse on the way things really are. But it seems like there was a time in which the ambassador was the goal for a lot of people. I want to be a brand ambassador. And then it was influencer. And I think it seems like a lot of people are tired of both. And I think it seems like people want true authenticity rather than someone saying I'm being authentic, which is like an act or it's performative. So I
Hmm.
wonder if there's going to be a bit of consolidation in the outdoor realm and people are going to go back to that. I want real quality and authentic views of the way things really are rather than the influencer type that's kind of, I wouldn't say infected, but is very prevalent in the outdoor realm now.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I've thought about this a lot and like did a little bit of writing about like quote unquote hunting influencers. And I think like on the whole, people who are in that space are probably more authentic than most who would be an influencer and say, I don't know, like the a big thing for I'm a 27-year-old girl. Like I get a lot of targeted ads for skincare. So like I I like to think there's a lot more authenticity in the outdoor media and the hunting media and even like outdoor social media than in a lot of places. And I also think like those people really do tend to come from just like a place of extreme passion for those pursuits. And so there might have been a time where I would have like, I don't know, rolled my eyes or, been like, oh, they're just like hawking product or whatever. But I also think it comes from a place of like trying to connect with an audience and inspire an audience that ultimately is kind of shrinking, or at least seems like it's shrinking. I mean, aren't we all sounding the alarm about, hunter numbers? Like I think I don't know. There is like an element of kind of icky consumerism and product pushing that can be annoying to a degree, but I also think there's just a lot of really passionate people who do like share informative content. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to figure out where that line
Mhm.
of authenticity is drawn.
I do think there's an acknowledgement that it's cool to be informed about larger ecosystems rather than like just a trophy type situation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's definitely catching on. So when people are talking about, it's not as simple as I hunt because it's my right. I think more people are becoming aware of the value of hunting, conservation versus preservation, and because you don't have the same gatekeepers as you used to, you have more access to people who are good at articulating those sort of things. So as a hunter, you can feel more, I don't know, there's maybe more substance. Like you know why you hunt, you can't really articulate it, but someone does a really good job of expressing that and expressing the importance and being able to talk about ecosystem and being able to talk about populations. And I think that's a really empowering, cool place. And that it seems like that voice has been amplified a lot more among common people and not just that bumper sticker, uh, all God's animals should be next to the potatoes or whatever on the plate, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think and again, I say all of this as someone who's only been doing this for a couple of years. And so, you know, I'm careful to not make big sweeping comments about change, big overwhelming change that's happened recently. Because again, like my perception only really first began yeah, like 3 or 4 years ago. But I do think it seems like hunters are being asked to really consider their why,
Mm.
um, maybe more than they have in the past. Um, I know that that's something that I've had to, well, not that I've had to, I've actively chosen to like really chew on that question of why am I doing this? Why am I suddenly interested in writing about this? Why am I suddenly interested in wildlife conservation and conservation policy and science and biology and this kind of random um, turn of beat from writing about sports, um, and it kind of feels like and I'm kind of writing a little bit about this right now for the Westrn. Like, the time is kind of coming for hunters to kind of celebrate and maybe talk a little bit more openly about the benefits that they can offer society, which, you know, to someone who doesn't hunt or is actively anti-hunting might come across as a little bit strange. But I think, yeah, trying to figure out the why was at least a big part of it for me, kind of at the forefront.
I think it's important too, especially you're contemplating that question in your 20s versus a kid who's always hunted, and the why was, well, because I just hunted with my dad since I was 6 or 7 or 8, or went to uncle's cabin, so that was just, I never really thought about anything else. So you coming in with an environmental background, people might think that, oh, this is an environmentalist. Like, that would be kind of the caricature of an environmentalist might be at odds with or in opposition to hunting, when really it just makes a more well-rounded hunter. And you asking those questions now, you're going to be able to articulate yourself in a much more nuanced way, which I think is, again, part of the value and the great time that we have right now, is because we have these people who are really thinking about that why and articulating it in a good way, or having conversations about it. And so any new hunter is contemplating that. And then hunter or apathetic hunter, people who are apathetic against or indifferent toward hunting, who wouldn't vote against it, they can see that. And that's such a great representation, because if they see the caricature, if they see what is being pushed by anti-hunting causes, and then they see someone who is articulate like yourself, that is going to be a better representation of hunting rather than the propaganda. And I think, again, the people who've been hunting their entire lives can learn from people that are asking those questions. So I think it's a really fun time, or a great time to be a hunter, because it's okay to ask those questions. It's okay to be a hunter and then also know about the environment and care about the environment. It's not one or the other.
I am so perpetually grossed out by the idea that they are not one and the same. I think as I feel like I'm starting to kind of come into some of these my own opinions on these topics that I largely have, like, you know, like I'm very much in like the formative years of my hunting experience, and I'm finding that I am increasingly frustrated with the overwhelmingly popular idea that hunters and environmentalists are not, or can't be, one and the same. And it comes up in a bunch of different contexts. I mean, it comes up in legal and political contexts, where you see, you know, legislation that wants to classify, I don't know, this is like a bill in Vermont. There was some talk of trying to like classify wildlife board members as like either representative of the consumptive wildlife use interest or non-consumptive wildlife use interest. Or you see it come up in like social contexts. Like, I posted a story, or I had written a story that had been posted to social media about chronic wasting disease. I've done a lot of writing about chronic wasting disease, and some of the impacts of CWD on whitetail populations. And someone commented on the story like, oh, well, she's an environmentalist, so what can we expect for her? And it's like, okay, well, like, I like, do we not rely on the environment to create a setting and continue to sustain this practice that we all give such a shit about? Like, pardon my language. Like, I find it really hard. And in fact, I find it impossible to extrapolate hunting from environmentalism. And I just refuse to believe that like politics and political leaning and partisanship need to like muddy those waters as much as they currently do. So yeah, I don't know. That's a hill that I plan on dying on throughout my career.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, it goes back to mentorship. And when you look at hunting as in its entirety rather than just antlers, and if you're mentored by someone who says, this is our right, we get to do this, and everybody else is against us. So, even to throw it into people's faces, I'm sure you saw um, the guy who had brought a trapped wolf into a tavern or somewhere and took some photos. And there's
Oh yeah,
always people
Cody Rob.
of taking photos of dead turkeys and like Taco Bell drive-throughs and whatnot, and that's sort of in your face. Take that, anti-hunter. That's really, really not helpful. And then if you happen to say, "Hey, I'm not really sure if that's a good idea," then all of a sudden you're an enemy too, rather than reflect and say, "Okay, well, is this really benefiting everything as a whole?" And I'm actually being more damaging to it. I'm that sort of self-reflection is a pretty important thing for us to do.
Well, yeah, and I think it's really easy for horrible actors like the Cody Roberts of the world, of which I think there are pretty few, um, to stand there on a platform and call themselves like a hunter. And what he did was not, I mean, I don't want to like dive into the legality of, and the all the various like ins and outs of that whole situation, but hunters do not stand by, or most hunters do not stand by his behavior. And the wildlife conservation community has taken such a beating as a result of that incident, and it's really frustrating to see because I don't know, it's very easy to conflate one person who kills an animal in one manner with another person who kills an animal in a different manner. And in our brains that really love like clean lines and sorting, it's very easy to just put them in the same camp. And so, yeah, I mean, is it hard to chew on the why, and like, do we want to have to like defend what we do to people who might not necessarily agree with it? Of course not. But I don't know. I'm pretty new to this, and so far, the part of it that I find the most exciting, or one of the parts that I find the most exciting, is the part where we get to talk about what it actually does for our lifestyle and for our the health of our community. And yeah, I mean, for the environmental element of it, I don't know. Yeah, that's
Has there
rambling.
been a person or a podcast or writer or what helped influence you and mentor you? And because you are new to this, you're in the process of being, still mentored and introduced to it. So, who has been important in your introduction to the hunting realm?
Oh man, well, I mean, I I always said that I like to make like a Devil Wears Prada joke about working at Meateater. Like, the main character of the Devil Wears Prada hated fashion when she showed up to work for Runway magazine, and by the end of it, she had, over the course of the movie, she became pretty obsessed with it. And so there was really no way for me to start working at Meateater and not um, immerse myself and ultimately like fall in love with that lifestyle. So that was extremely formative. And I got to work under Sam Lundgren and Spencer Newharth, and I got to work with Maggie Hudlow. And those three people were extraordinarily formative in how I kind of interacted with that world, especially as a beginner. Like, I was very much welcomed with open arms, which was a pretty amazing feeling. I even got to go on Steve's podcast once, which was really terrifying. and super fun and interesting. And I got to talk about illegal endangered species taxidermy on Amazon and eBay, which was just a very unique topic. So that was really cool. And then at Outdoor Life, like the news team, Dak Collins and Natalie Krebs and Alex Robinson is the editor-in-chief. Like that whole crew. It's like a small masthead, but it's a really, really powerful and very high productivity group of people, and so that was also extremely informative. Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot from the people I've worked with, and I've been really lucky to have, I don't know, a lot of really, really interesting people in my corner, and just kind of, one phone call away. I really enjoy getting to, I like sometimes get to talk with Andrew McKean, who's like a great mentor and influencer. Actually, I don't mean like that. He's not an influencer, but he's
Yeah.
an influencer for me. And now I get to work with Nicole Qualtieri and Kestrel Keller and Gabriella Zaldambide at the Westrn, and that is a really high-powered crew. I am super psyched to be on board over there. So yeah, just like really interesting people from a really varied assortment of backgrounds and experience levels and interests, and I'm super lucky in that sense. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention my dad. I mean, he's the reason why I felt comfortable getting into this in the first place, and he's always been really supportive, and we get to hunt together, which is probably the most important piece of it. So yeah, he's a special.
It's interesting. You mentioned Meateater, and it's a behemoth now. I remember when it was just first starting out, the first time I saw, I don't know if it was season one or season two, but I thought, man, this is great. This is the exact type of show, or the exact type of person that should have a show. Ranella is clearly articulate, and a public land show, and it was great. But as things grew, it kind of became something that, and I kind of noticed the people here in Southeast not like it as much because it was just this huge thing that didn't represent them anymore, even though the individual pieces of the company would probably be people that you would love to hang out with, you would hunt with, you would talk to, you would share a beer with. Once Meateater became so big, it just kind of ceased to be what it was, and people kind of reacted negatively to it. And I know some people who still don't forgive Outdoor Life and these other big magazines that they had one person come to, let's say, Prince of Wales and did a hunt, and well, ever since that big magazine came here, the hunting hasn't been good, and there's pressure, and there's this and that. It's like, man, that was like, you're blaming that was 20 years ago. That was just a magazine article, and that can change things. But it is interesting that some people can't separate the brand or the individual person from the brand name. And if the individual people that work there are great people, then that means that the brand probably isn't this horrible, big monstrosity, evil empire.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I stand pretty firmly on the ground that, at least from my perspective, like, I'm one person, and so I don't necessarily have much to say on behalf of people frustrated by Meateater's presence in Alaska or Outdoor Life's presence in some, a remote area. But
yeah, it's just an interesting. Without those big things, without these people having these conversations, like, where would we be? Because we have to have something. We have to have a large enough megaphone. Otherwise, we're all going to be, or rallying point. If we weren't centralized in some ways, then we'd all be individuals screaming into the void, and there'd be no collective effort. So if people want to criticize large companies, businesses, travel writing, whatever, for advertising things. Well, along with that comes this ability to be congealed, to be supportive, and to be a larger body to fight the well organized anti hunting groups.
Well, and I think there's a larger piece to all of this that is kind of getting left out of this conversation, which is just like the storytelling history of the hunting and fishing population of North America, which stretches back, I mean, tens of thousands of years. So, like, I think what we miss out on in the absence of a Meateater, an outdoor life, the Westrn, any, from big to small outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen who also act as storytellers in that space, kind of going back to the concept of the why. Like, if you can't tell the story of a species, if you can't tell the story of a place, if you can't tell the story of a group of people doing something that they're passionate about, and you can't use that story to inspire other people, then, nothing great happens in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And forward progress, and I know that word scares people, but like forward progress certainly does not happen in a vacuum. And if the goal is ultimately to secure some portion of Americans' abilities to continue hunting and fishing well into the future, if our mind is really for future generations, like we all say it is, then being able to share stories is integral to the future survival of these practices. And I'm not necessarily saying they're on the chopping block. Like, I'm not interested in sounding any sort of huge alarm. I just think there's a lot of really great stories to tell from this little pocket of the outdoor recreating world. And I think people external of it are really getting the wool pulled over their eyes and are pretty massively, I don't know, they're getting some pretty poor messages about what the value of these practices is to the larger landscape. And if it isn't for storytelling, and if hunters and anglers were to exist in a vacuum, I think things would turn south pretty quickly for all of us. So.
Well, historically, hunting has been a rite of passage for so many cultures, which showed the value, and you're contributing to the community. So it's been imperative to our culture and our growing up. So changing gears a little bit, what's like your favorite thing that you've written about, or something that was really interesting, or something that you really loved tracking down and writing about?
Oh man. I mean, I've working on the news team at Outdoor Life meant kind of like, covering a lot of different kinds of topics on a day-to-day basis, which was always really fun. I always used to say I was kind of, and I kind of continue to be, I was on like the wildlife cops and courts beat. So I really I don't love the fact that it's so prevalent that it feels like something that's always in the news, but like poaching busts have always been of huge interest to me. And then I did, a lot of work on chronic wasting disease and research and mitigation in that particular little pocket of wildlife science. Wildlife science in general, wildlife biology, conservation policy. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Everything except for I feel like I've written a lot about everything that's kind of in the orbit of hunting without doing a whole lot of really like legitimate, true hunting writing, if that makes sense. And I think my interests just kind of lie with some of the more like adjacent topics. I don't know if that's answering your question at all, but
No, that's good. What about a story that you want to write, or is there a category of stories, or even a specific story that you'd like to track down and write?
oh man, I am currently working on a story about sustainability in the hunting apparel industry, which will come out in the Westrn most likely next week. So I'm super excited about that. I'm really interested in stories that I take interest in stories that kind of work on the intersection of hunting and like modern society in North America. Um, Stories that talk about, I mean, I'm again, like, this is no secret. I write about the intersection of like hunting and climate change. That's never something that I'm going to shy away from. I'm curious about people who are, new hunters, like the adult onset hunter, people who might not necessarily look like your traditional North American hunter. I don't know, just stories that kind of look at the future of hunting in the United States and kind of ask the question of what that's really going to look like. Really with a mind toward, securing the practice and resources for generations. So, yeah.
With everything that's changing, and like culture, and I mean it's always been changing. So there's never like all the stories about hunting are done. They've already been told. It's always interesting new angles. Is there any place you'd like to go to hunt?
Oh man. Oh my goodness. I mean, I would really like to just be able to go on a public land in Montana and I feel like I know what the heck I'm doing. um, I think I have a really long way to go in terms of becoming the kind of like Western big game hunter that I aspire to be before I can really even reasonably start thinking about going elsewhere. I mean, I think it'd be pretty incredible to get out into like, I mean, Alaska would be amazing, but yeah, I feel like there's a lot that I still have yet to do kind of in Montana when I eventually get back up there. So yeah, I know it's not the most original answer, but probably just learning a little bit more about, yeah, Western big game hunting from the ground.
Yeah, I got a coughing fit here. It sounded
You
like Doc
okay?
Holiday. Yeah, my brother had a cold. We just got back from a fly out hunt, and he had a cold,
Oh
and I
no.
haven't really like had it until 10 seconds ago.
Came-
Ooh, well, I was almost I was going to ask you to kind of in closing tell people where they can find your work, and the talk about the Western a little bit.
yeah, I can do that definitely. Um, so yeah, so I've been a full-time freelancer since the start of May. And so I'm not really keeping an updated list of work, but on my website, is katiehillwriter.com. I am still a regular contributor at Outdoor Life, mostly news, kind of in like the wildlife space. So yeah, my stuff is definitely still publishing over there. And then the Westrn is new, currently digital, but with plans to become print down the road. New outdoor publication, kind of focusing on more long form, slow journalism, some creative writing poetry, visual art, more of kind of a literary journal type style to it than necessarily like hard news. So yeah, that's at thewestern.com. THEWESTRN. We cut out that second E because we're cool like that. And yeah, so that's where my stuff is. I'm on social media at Hill, yeah. But really not, I don't know. I don't, like I said before, I'm not the world's biggest social media person, so that's not necessarily a great place to find updated stuff. But yeah, I'm around.
Well, thanks again for being on here. Really appreciate it. I've enjoyed reading your stuff for the last couple of years. So thanks for being on
Thank
here.
you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.